Hey dears, Whimsy here with two fantastic fantasy series that came out this month that I just have to gush about. And the first one is a historical fantasy retelling of the founder of the Ming dynasty's rise to power in China. And this story centers around two siblings who grew up in a very poor village, and they're given two very different fates by a fortune teller. So the fortune teller says that the girl will be nothing, she'll become nothing, and then the son is destined for greatness. However, when bandits attack their family, the son dies, and so the daughter's like, okay, my brother took my place, he took my fate, so I'll take his name and I'll take his fate and I'll rise to greatness. So she becomes a monk then, she trains with monks, and she starts insinuating herself into politics as there's this rising rebellion against the Mongolian Empire. And this series just has so many morally gray characters. It's brutal. I do have to get that disclosure. People are being killed right and left. There's backstabbing, people are being drawn and quartered and tortured, and it's a gruesome, unflinching book. Yeah, this book really delivers in the political intrigue department, and I think that's thanks to the author's background. So she was actually a diplomat in Southeast Asia for years, and I feel like this book is so well researched, and the world building and characters are so well fleshed out, and it just feels immersive and believable, and I just enjoyed it so much. Although the end is heavy. I will have to warn that. So I think some people hate the main character by the end, but if you just understand that this is kind of based in history, a very brutal time in history, it's fairly accurate in that department. Yeah, this was my most highly anticipated book of the year, and it did not disappoint at all, and I cannot recommend it enough if you love a good historical fantasy, and especially if you are a fan of the Poppy War. I feel like it has a very similar tone to it. Okay, next I have the epic fantasy series that I was almost hesitant to pick up because it is over 700 pages long, and epic fantasy series are a huge time and emotional commitment because I've started Game of Thrones and Name of the Wind, and those series have been put on hold, so I've been burned before, so I've been almost a little reluctant to commit to another epic fantasy series, but I'm glad that I started this one. It's called The Empire's Ruin, and I have to add one more addendum caveat. I hadn't read any of the other books in the series. This is the beginning of a new spin-off series, so this takes place after war, and I actually found this book really accessible and newcomer friendly. I guess the one other comparison I could say is probably the Mistborn series. There's so many spin-offs and starting points that I feel like you can kind of jump in at the beginning of what one you want, and yeah. Okay, with that big introduction out of the way, let's get into the book itself. So The Empire's Ruin follows three main storylines. One is Gwenna Sharp, who is a disgraced commander who is sent to a deadly continent to redeem herself so she can collect prized warbird eggs. However, this continent has a strange sickness that affects all life on it. So it starts twisting and transforming it, and any human who arrives on that continent does not come back the same. They either die or they go insane. Okay, next we have Akil, who is a con artist monk who is trying to scam the emperor by claiming that he knows how to use these ancient artifacts called Kenta gates that allow people to basically step through this magical door portal and go across the world quickly. And of course, that's a strategic advantage. The Emperor wants to learn how to use these again. However, Akil doesn't technically know how to use them. He knows theoretically, so he kind of is totally BSing the Emperor, and he starts finding himself in between a rock and a hard place. And then lastly, we have Rook, who is a priest of the goddess of love with a bloody and dark past. So when he's captured and thrown into this gladiator arena pit for a fight for survival, he has to wrestle with his beliefs and his convictions. And all I have to say is all these characters, the main characters, are so well written. We get wonderful character development, and this book is basically the best I could ask for in epic fantasy because of the length. You get wonderful world building. We get like interesting things about warring gods, and then the magic system is really interesting. So the magic users are called leeches, and basically they have an affinity towards one element. Usually it's like fire, wood, something elemental, or it could be something abstract like dreams or fear, and things get really interesting when that happens. So like the world building itself is interesting, and then I found the characters so compelling. Like I was really enjoying this book. Even though it's 700 pages, I have to say the pages just flew by for me because I was so immersed in this story, in this plot, and I loved it so much, especially if you were listening to the first subplot with Gwenna. It reminds me of Annihilation. It's like a fantasy spin on Annihilation, so I was like pogging, like, yes, we get these monstrous creatures that they confront. And I will say, it also reminds me of the manga Hell's Paradise, which if you haven't read it, it has my stamp of approval. So it was interesting seeing a more fantasy spin on Annihilation. Like, I'm just a sucker for that. And the ending was really satisfying too. Like I was hollering and rooting for the characters, and I think just like an ongoing trend that I've noticed in some series, like with Black Sun, is that the endings feel so abrupt. Like I guess it's intentional to be a cliffhanger, but for me it's like it's not satisfactory as a standalone. And so in some ways I don't like cliffhangers. I like satisfying big climaxes that play out. So I will say this is a very satisfying first in its spin-off series, and I cannot recommend it enough if you're looking for another good epic fantasy with wonderful, well-written characters in a really interesting world. All right, those are all I have to say about those two series. If you have read any good fantasy series, let me know down in the comments below, and also let me know what are your most anticipated series for this year, because we're still like at the halfway point, and I can't believe I'm saying like this year is almost halfway over. Like time is flying. So many books, so little time. Anyways, as always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the flip side. See ya.